So, let's continue watching this exciting story. Someone just cut it and drew a line. You said that you can only go this far, and that you can't go any further. Even though dungeons were created in the world, talented people were awakened, and all kinds of transcendent beings appeared in the world. That was the only thing I was presented with. Your limits are here. I can't go any further. 0-star incompetent public. There is no possibility of becoming a talented person in the future. That was my judgment. It was useless to ask why I couldn't go because there were so many people ahead of me everywhere, and if I had to stay in this mud alone. While they enjoyed the warmth and riches of the world in a bright place, I had to pick up crumbs from under my feet. Some have crossed that line with money, and some have been pulled up into a network. It was no use begging me for a fair way to compete, for a chance, with a wounded hand. This reality was strictly determined, the limit of my possibilities. No matter how hard I tried, it didn't change. A 29-year-old who is forced to see reality. I had no choice but to agree. Until you go to hell. Mars Mana Specialized Industrial District. It was an area where the largest mana-related industrial plants in Korea were concentrated. It is no exaggeration to say that crystal moss collected in Korea is gathered here. The mana-related business extracted from the crystal moss after the occurrence of the dungeon was a business that led the future. Of course, all the people working here were working with pride. Kang Hyunmoo was also working in this industrial district. They're narrow-minded kids. Apparently, even among people with long bag straps, there seems to be some dissatisfaction. It seems like a more complicated problem than simply reducing the amount of crystal moss, like we gatherers. It was said that 30 years ago, everyone worked hard and held hands, and had an amazing atmosphere. Then what? It was natural when the dungeon was just created. To be precise, 29 years ago, dungeons suddenly opened all over the world, and mana poured in from there. As mana drenched the world, some people with a constitution sensitive to mana awakened their abilities. People who were able to use mana to strengthen their bodies or use skills were called capable people. In addition, numerous items found in the dungeon gave them superhuman abilities. It was a shock in itself, but it was the crystal moss in the dungeon that changed the whole society, not the talented person. Crystal moss, the medium that made mana usable in everyday life. Humanity began to enjoy a new golden age as this crystal moss permeated many new businesses and development engines. The monsters that appeared in the dungeon did not pose a threat to society unless they entered the dungeon. The monsters that often appeared outside the dungeon were usually only stupid and weak ones. Instead, those who risked their lives to enter the dungeon enjoyed the greatest benefits as they were called hunters. There were many people who had jobs related to dungeons even if they weren't capable. Management that helps hunters take on the chores even if they do not have the ability. Explorers who focus on dungeon exploration rather than hunting. Porters who enter dungeons with hunters, and miners who dig crystal moss that only inhabit dungeons. Among them, it was no exaggeration to say that the miner, which Hyunmoo is doing, is the lowest level. And quote. Actually, most of the breakthroughs were made then. They're eating away at that legacy now. And quote. Yuman looked down at the crystal moss remnants inside his colander with his dreamy expression. And quote. 30 years ago, Hunters who were less than level 10 trembled and explored the dungeon. Now, regular subjugation of 4-star dungeons and attacking 5-star dungeons seems like a great thing, but in the end, interest groups are controlling it, and quote. You were very interested in that, and quote. I really wanted to do something related to the dungeon. I couldn't become a hunter because I wasn't a talented person, but I thought I could do anything, but I'm still a student. End quote. It seems that the pilgrimage to Hunter was also regretful about his unfulfilled dream. Hyunmoo couldn't be ridiculed for being childish, because Hyunmoo was also similar to Yuman. If only the ability level was 1 star. The income of the collectors and hunters is vast. Hunters can gather large crystal moss that other people cannot touch, and they sell monster corpses and items for hundreds or thousands of dollars. However, Kang Hyunmoo received a rating of 0 stars. It means incompetent people. However, of the 7 billion people in the world, 6.93 billion are ordinary people. There is nothing wrong with being physically healthy and young. After all, the people who move most of the world and important parts are ordinary people. However, Hyunmoo wasn't the type to be content with what he had. I want to climb too. Hyunmoo strongly wished. Up to this point, Hyunmoo had only scanned his floor and mud. He was accustomed to the smell of dirt thicker than the fresh air in the sky, and the smell of waste from the sewer rather than the fresh wind, but even though he was dipping his feet in the mud, his hands wanted to grab the stars. Hyunmoo sold the crystal moss residue he had collected all day to a factory worker. Although he spent the whole day wandering through the toxic waste, he earned 97,000 won. Profits were worse than usual. It's better than a part-time job, but considering that making a mistake can put your life at risk, it's an absurdly small amount. However, in an era where even part-time students looked at TOEIC scores, there was not much that Hyunmoo, an orphan, could do. If you're lucky, you might hit the jackpot. If you are lucky enough to pick up a large lump, you can easily receive 300,000 won. Among the rumors secretly handed down, there was a story of a miner who made a fortune by picking up the remnants he had accumulated over the years. If you overdo it a little more. There was a saying that a man from a miner was exposed to high-density mana and awakened his abilities. If you stay in a room with a high concentration of mana with crystal moss for a long time, even a 0-star incompetent person may awaken to a 1-star. Because it depends on how sensitive your body is to mana. However, Hyunmoo's expression hardened. Her mother had heard that she had died shortly after she gave birth to herself, and she grew up without hearing her father's name. In an instant, Hyunmoo's mind began to run in a complicated way. All of a sudden, your father has a lawyer come to visit you? Could it be that there is some kind of drama like being the hidden child of a second-generation chaebol? I understand your concerns, but the lawyer gently rapped Hyunmoo's hand. Then he spoke with a firm expression on his face. First of all, I wish the deceased well. The first news about my father I met after 29 years was the news of his death. Returning to his cramped Gosewon room, Hyunmoo could not erase his complicated thoughts. The news of his father's death for the first time in his life is the news of his death. To be honest, Hyunmoo had a grudge against his father who didn't even know his name, but his affection was not even the slightest bit. Gave birth to you. The hard work was done by the mother, but honestly, the father only enjoyed it once. My father was the one who planted a seed and said that he did not know me. He didn't even want to know. That was Hyunmoo's cynical gaze. Besides, her mother even killed her, giving birth to herself. She said, "It's something the deceased left behind." What the lawyer handed over to Hyunmoo was a strange piece of stone engraved with a strange pattern. He made a small hole in the top of the stone like a necklace, but no matter how much he looked at it, he couldn't tell what the material was. The lawyer answered Hyunmoo's questions. "It's called the Hearthstone. It's an item brought from a dungeon." But even the lawyer said he didn't know what it was. Hyunmoo also did not understand his father, who dared to pass on such things to him. "Damn it. It just gives me a headache." Hyunmoo grumbled and turned on the TV to think about something else. However, he failed to clear the clutter. Even on TV, he was full of stories about hunters and dungeons. No matter how many channels were turned, not even the usual celebrity gossip came out. All channels were pouring out similar stories. Later Lee Ji-tae, from the moment he awakened as the third generation of the Taeseong group's chaebol, he was a talented person among the talented. With the talent of being a 4-star, as well as his popularity, appearance, and talent as a hunter. Among the golden spoons, there is no such golden spoon. On the other hand, I've inherited a piece of stone. That's all. He was the opposite of Hyunmoo in every way. At this level of difference, he does not feel inferior. He's only blaming the world's absurd standards. If there is a difficulty in life, you're going to be a tutorial. What am I? Hyunmoo laughed out loud. Difficult? Or very difficult? No. It would be a nightmare or hell. Hey. What kind of nonsense thinking while your limbs are intact? However, Hyunmoo wasn't the type of person who thought that he was better than others. He always had a desire and lack of success. Hyunmoo turned on the TV again. News about Lee Ji-tae's success in attacking the 5-star dungeon was still coming out and people were discussing it. Using the sound of the TV as a lullaby, Hyunmoo went to sleep. If my life is hell, I hope there is a reward worthy of it. Want to get up, I want to climb even after trampling on it. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. We'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this. Until next time, take care.